everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Walk. I'm your host, Joshua Ingram. It is Monday, September 12th, year of our Lord, 2022. And this is episode number 71. I don't know if I have enough for a podcast message here. It was just something I was just thinking about. We'll see how it goes, but I've discussed before my issues with people saying hell is eternal, because I feel like there's a distinction between hell and the lake of fire, and the lake of fire may be the one that's eternal. Hell is like a temporary holding cell. I get that from Revelation, where at the end of everything, after Christ has returned and the devil's been thrown into the lake of fire, it says death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire. So hell is distinct from the lake of fire, and hell has an end. Hell will be thrown into the lake of fire at the end. So it almost seems like hell is like a holding cell. And what led me to think about this was I was thinking about the millennium. I was thinking, like, what if Christ returned tomorrow and established his millennium? Then at the very least, somebody who dies today, a lost person who dies today, is going to spend the next 1,000 years in hell. So at the very minimum, you know, if you're lost and you die right before Christ returns, you're going to hell for 1,000 years. And where I get that from is that at the end of the millennium, again in the book of Revelation, it says that the dead are raised. And they're brought before the judgment seat of Christ. And so there's the way I read scriptures is the process of events here on earth is that at some point Christ is going to return visibly in the clouds. Every eye will see him. And when that happens, everybody who's saved, everybody who's born again, is if they've died, prior to that return, if they've died, they'll be resurrected. They'll be raised from the graves with a new body, a glorified, sin-free, perfect body. And for any of the believers that are alive when that happens, they'll be instantly transformed. They'll instantly and miraculously be translated, be transformed into that new body. So the Lord returns, the dead saints are raised, and those of us that are alive and remain are instantly changed into glorified bodies. All right, and then we raise up to meet the Lord in the air, and then we descend with him, and he comes down and he lands in Jerusalem, and he wipes out all the kingdoms of darkness. He destroys them all. So when those dead saints are raised and given glorified bodies, the scriptures call that the first resurrection. And it says, blessed and holy is he who takes part in the first resurrection, for the second death, it won't affect him. So that's that first resurrection, the resurrection of the saints, when Christ returns. Right? And then the Lord lands in Jerusalem, wipes out the devil's kingdoms, tossed the beast and the false prophet into the lake of fire, bound Satan for 1,000 years, and establishes an actual physical kingdom here on earth, where he rules and reigns from Jerusalem. And there'll be remnants of people all over the earth, people who didn't take the mark but aren't necessarily saved. They're left here, and then we rule and reign with Christ. And it says we'll be judges with him. We'll be kings and priests, and we'll judge the angels. So we'll have a time, like, for people who deny the millennium. Well, then when exactly are we judging the angels? Because in eternity there's no sin. So what would judgment be needed for? It's during this millennium period where we rule with Christ over the earth, over the remnants of people that were left here, and apparently the angels as well, and we'll rule and reign with him, and that it'll be like a perfected earth. The Bible says that if somebody dies at the age of 100, so death still exists as well, so that's a proof that it's not eternity. Isaiah says that if somebody dies at the age of 100, they'll be considered like an infant. People will be shocked. They'll be like, wow, he was so young. So we're going to have those long lives again like they did pre-flood. And it says that the lamb and the wolf will lie down together. So there'll be no more predatory instincts in animals. Everything will go back to the way it was in the Garden of Eden, eating vegetation and fruits and vegetables, and not killing. It says that a baby will be able to play with a snake, a poisonous asp, so there's no poisonous snakes anymore. It's a perfected kingdom. And the nations, those remnant people that are left, will beat their weapons into plows. So there's no more war, no more need of anything, and Christ will rule with a rod of iron. It'll be a righteous kingdom. Like, sin will be dealt with. And so that goes on for 1,000 years. And then at the end of the 1,000 years, it says Satan's released, and he goes out and deceives the peoples of the nations again, and causes them to revolt against God and to surround Jerusalem, attempting to overthrow Jesus. And it says when that happens, God rains down fire from heaven, which I think is what Peter talks about when it says the elements will melt with fervent heat. I think that's the period it's talking about. And that fire from heaven will wipe everybody out, and then earth and heaven flee. Like, there's nothing left. We all then, like, everything disappears, like a scroll being rolled up, or a curtain being open, and behind the curtain is the throne room of God. And that's when eternity starts. We all enter into the throne room of God. And then it says the dead come back. That's the second resurrection, and everybody's judged. Books are opened and there's judgment given. Anyone not found written in the book of life is cast into the lake of fire. So while that's going on earth, what it appears to be going on behind the scenes is that everybody who dies apart from Christ goes to hell. That's like, it's like a holding cell pre-judgment, where the demons are, bound in everlasting chains, and like, I think the book of Job describes the hell, like the bars of the earth, and the tormenting flames, and this just, it's a torturous place. It is hell. It's a literal hell where people are bound, and that's where you go if you don't know Christ. When you die, that's where you're going. You're descending down into hell, and your consciousness is going to be there, and you're going to be aware. Like Jesus told the story of Lazarus and the rich man. The rich man was in hell, being tormented by the flames, just wanting one drop of water. So that's what that's going to be like, and you're going to stay there until that second resurrection. And so, like I say, I think hell has an end. So then at that second resurrection, hell gives up its dead. Everybody is raised and appears before the throne room. So it's like you're in that holding cell awaiting your trial. And then at the end of the 1,000-year reign, that's when the trial happens. You're raised and you're brought before the throne of God. And your crimes are going to be read in the courtroom. The books are open, and you're going to give an account of everything you've ever done, said, thought. It's all written down. And if your name's not written in the book of life, which only comes through repentance and faith in Jesus Christ, through believing in the blood of Jesus Christ, through being born again by the faith of Jesus Christ, that's how you get your name written. If your name, and then you have your book blotted out. The handwriting of ordinances that was against us is blotted out, it says in Colossians 2. So the dead that were in hell, they're doomed. If you find yourself in hell, your name's not in that book of life, because if your name was in the book of life, you would have had part in the first resurrection. the first resurrection that happens when Christ returns prior to the millennium, and you would have been given a glorified body and you would rule and reign with Christ. But if you find yourself in hell, that means you're doomed. That there is no escape now. You're going from worse to worse. You're in this terrible torture chamber, and then at the end of the millennium, you're going to appear before the judgment seat and have your crimes read. And at the end of the trial, you're going to be cast alive into the lake of fire, where the smoke of the torment ascends forever and ever, and there's no rest day or night, and the worm dieth not. There's a terrible, terrible judgment coming. So anyways, this led me to think about how evil the Catholic institution's teaching on purgatory is, and how doubly wicked this is, because for Catholics who die in their sins and they find themselves in hell, they find themselves in this torturous holding cell, so to speak, they've been taught that it's just purgatory, that they have to suffer a little while, and at some point they're going to get out, and so they're down there with false hope, thinking there's a way out. And so when they're brought before the throne room, they're going to think, yes, I've done my time in purgatory and now I get to go into glory. And then they're going to hear, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Think about how evil that teaching of purgatory is, because you're giving these people this false hope, this false comfort in hell, thinking, this is temporary, I'm going to get out, I'm going to get to go to heaven when this is over. And then you just, so on top of the just judgment of God condemning them to hell for their unbelief and their sins, they're also going to have their hearts crushed, their hope crushed, their all that hope that they had, that they were just in purgatory and they just had to endure a little while. It all comes to an end. And so, that teaching of purgatory is just tragic, utterly tragic. I've talked a lot on this podcast about the schedules I try to keep, and how my particular character is one that I perform best under a schedule, a regiment. I think by nature I'm a procrastinator and very lazy, and so I set myself schedules to try to keep motivated, to keep things in mind of what I need to get done. And so I have a chores list. I do certain chores on Mondays, and certain chores on Tuesdays, certain chores on Wednesdays, and there's times for them. I do a certain thing in the morning, certain thing in the afternoon, certain thing in the evening, so on and so forth. And my gym schedule is regimented. I work out a particular muscle group this day, and then the next day I do a different muscle group, and so on and so forth. And the different ministry things that I do and things like that. And I tried to have and I talked about this here recently on I think 2 podcasts ago. I try to have a regimented schedule for spiritual activities. I struggle. I assume it's the same with every Christian, but I know myself most intimately, and I've always been very transparent, which is part of why this podcast is happening, but I've always been very transparent about my own struggles with sin, because I don't want to put on a fake facade. I don't want to put on this, if somebody new to the faith or somebody struggling themselves is listening, I don't want to give the idea that everybody but you is walking in holiness. I want to be, because I get that idea too. You go to church and you see the pastor and the elders and you think, man, does anybody struggle like I struggle? it seems like it's not talked about. A lot of times I'll even listen to like sermons, and they talk about how Christ's blood has forgiven us of our sins in past tense. But what about current sins? There's not and of course the blood covers those current sins, but there's not a lot of talk about ongoing current sin, at least not from a person. Nobody stands up and says, I am currently dealing with this. And perhaps that's because pastors are above reproach, and they've put to death those things, and you don't hear a lot from the uncalled Christians, those who haven't been called to preach. So my hope is that my transparency can help others in their struggle, not to comfort them in their sins, but to let them know they're not alone. And I view myself as the chief of all sinners, because I'm intimately aware of my thought life, and the imaginations and the thoughts that occur in my heart, and how blasphemous and just terribly wicked these thoughts can be. And so I know the things I've done and the things I've thought about, and so I view myself as far worse than anybody else. Like, and I believe that is a blessing, because it helps me. Like, I could never look down my nose at anybody else. I could never. How am I gonna? A person could confess the worst things to me, and if they're in sorrow and repentance over it, I'm gonna sympathize with them. I'm not gonna look down my nose at anybody. So I think that's a blessing in it, but it is wearisome, because I am constantly in an internal battle, 24/7. Well, not 24/7. There's rest when you sleep, I guess. But in all my waking hours, I'm constantly in combat with my thoughts. A sinful thought will creep in, and I see it immediately. I'm aware of it, and it's like, what is that? That's got to go, and there's just always this internal wrestling going on. And so my hope has always been that if you can stay busy in the things of the Lord, if you can stay busy in spiritual things, you won't have time to dwell on sinful thoughts. Or because what happens is, if you're sitting there idly, those thoughts turn to fantasies, and then those fantasies turn to action. You sit and you think about a certain sinful thing, and then that initial thought, you start playing it out in your mind, going, how would it take place? What would it look like? And then before you know it, it leads to an action. And so that idle time is really a killer. I try to, and because I am a procrastinator, and because I am lazy by nature, that is my huge downfall. If I get done with work and I sit around, and I got, you turn the TV on, and you sit there in just a blank idle time, and all of a sudden the thoughts start to wander, and you start thinking about fleshly, wickedness. And so in order to combat that, you have things like, if we walk in the Spirit, and walk is an action, a movement. If we walk in the Spirit, we won't fulfill the lusts of the flesh. And my target verse is the Proverbs 16:3. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. And so my hope is, if I can continually stay focused on spiritual activity, then I won't fulfill the lust of the flesh. I won't have time to think about fleshly things. And so I have a spiritual schedule, which I talked about here a couple podcasts ago. The problem is it's very easy to deviate from that schedule, and to just go, I don't have to get that done today. I'm just gonna chill. I'm just gonna, because it is work. It's laborious. We labor in these things. Again, walk in the Spirit. That's a continual action. Like, I was thinking about it today. Like, I've been in a swamp of despair, so to speak, for a long time now. Not necessarily despair, but just not where I need to be, spiritually speaking. And I was thinking today, it's like I'm in a swamp, and the swamp is up to my nostrils. And for a long time, I've just been sitting there, just barely making it, just keeping the head above water, just breathing through the nose, just barely getting there. And when I stick to the schedule, when I keep my mind on spiritual things, it's like I've taken a couple steps out, so that instead of just my nostrils sticking out, now I've got my chin out, my whole head is out, and I can feel the sunlight coming down on my face, and it feels so good. The problem is the weeds have a hold of my arms. I'm snared by the sinfulness of life, the sinfulness of the flesh. It's got a hold of my arms, and it's trying to pull me back into the swamp. And so it's a continual struggle. It's a continual, I have to keep fighting, or if I just relax, I'm going to be pulled back into the swamp. So there's this idea of walking in the Spirit is a continual progressive action, and it can be laborious and it can be wearisome. And I was thinking today, but the hope is, if I keep going, eventually I'm going to be out of this swamp, and then it's, back to nice and easy walking. But I got to keep going, and part of that is sticking to the schedule, because what I've done the last few days is I thought about, okay, how can I ensure that I maintain this schedule? How can I ensure that during my work day, instead of watching YouTube videos, as I'm typing in my info, because I work on a computer, so on one screen I can be typing something in, on the other screen I can have something playing on YouTube. Instead of doing that, I need to have sermons playing, or Christian podcasts, something that stimulates my mind towards spiritual things. And prior to that, I need to start my day in prayer and worship. And then I need to, on my breaks, instead of going and watching TV, I need to be reading the scriptures. And after work, I need to not just brush it aside, but I need to do some sort of ministry activity, record a video or do the podcast or something like that. I need to do those things. And then I can't put off going to the gym, because that's not spiritual, but it's occupying my mind and time. There's not time for fleshly things when I'm working out, so I need to do these things. I have to do them. If I relax on any of them, if I stop walking, if I stop tugging against the world and trying to get out of this swamp, then I'm naturally just gonna slink back into it. And I'll never get out if I don't walk, if I don't take these actions. So it's like, how do I stick to this schedule? And so my thought was accountability, and I thought, I don't know how well accountability works, because I've got brothers in the faith that we walk out this life together with, but there's no authority. So like, if I fail, they'll be disappointed, but life goes on because they fail as well. So I was thinking, like, will it work? And I was like, here's what I'll do. I'm just gonna, every day I'm gonna start the day by sending my brother a message saying, here's what I plan on doing today to walk in the Spirit. And then, because there's like this, it's almost like there's an added commitment to it. Like, because I shared it with him, and the next day he's going to want to know whether or not I followed through. It's like there's this added motivation, or added urgency, not urgency, there's this added necessity of following through. Like, because now I'm accountable. I can't just say, I'm not going to do that today and go watch TV, because if I don't do that today, tomorrow I got to face that shame of telling my brother I failed. And so, and then the added bonus was, like, I can use this idea to encourage them as well. Like, I can say, here's what I plan on doing today to walk in the Spirit. What do you plan on doing today? And then we can encourage each other through that and keep and try to keep going. And so I've done that the last few days, and it's worked. It's been incredibly beneficial, because like if I don't do something all day long, I'm thinking I got to get that done so tomorrow I can tell my brother I got it done. And it's helped. It's helped a lot. I've been focused on spiritual things, and following through on things and getting things done. But then last night I was praying, and I was thinking there is a possibility that this turns into like kind of a legalistic ritual type thing, where it's a burden, and it's like, it becomes that kind of thing. It becomes a heavy weight, and I don't want that to happen. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to try to keep my mind focused on spiritual things, and I don't want it to become a burdensome legalistic ritual. And so I was wrestling out, like, how do I balance that? I really don't want it to turn into a legalistic thing, and I don't have the answer yet. I know, I'm only a couple days into this. I believe this is the third day I've been doing it, and I've had success. And it's like, okay, this is good. It's been a really good week, so far. You've been focused on spiritual things. Having accountability with your brother is working. It's encouraging him to do things as well. It's got me in my prayer closet again. It's got me, and the Lord has revealed things in prayer that are interesting, but I just don't want to lose the joy in it. I don't want to lose, I don't want it to become a burdensome ritual. And so if you think about it, keep me in prayer for that. But in the meantime, it's working pretty good for me. And like I say, it is just coming to the realization that, like, I've always, I remember way back early in my faith, I would think, all right, I'm spending 50% of my time doing spiritual things, and then 50% of the time doing what I would say is not necessarily sinful things, but just kind of, chilling, just watching TV, not really focused on any spiritual activity, just being lazy, being lethargic, which again, that's my nature, that's my fallback. If I don't have a plan, I'm going to be lazy and lethargic and a procrastinator. And so I would always look at myself and go, all right, you're 50% there. And then at some points when I'm really walking in the Spirit, I'd be like, man, I'm like 70%. And for some reason I was settled with that. I was like, okay, that's okay. But it occurred to me the other day, like, this is, it's laborious. It's effort. It's this walk, this life in Christ. You have to strive. You have to run. It's a battle against the flesh. And if we're not battling, if we just sit down, then you're going backwards. You're failing. The flesh wins by default. So if we go into a default position, the flesh wins. To walk in the Spirit, it requires continual effort. And so we have to keep going, and there's no rest in that. There's no, I don't want to use the word rest, because we are at rest. There is a Sabbath, there's a joy. We have a victory, it's guaranteed. We're already justified. So in that we are at rest. But the work, we work out our salvation. It is a work. There's a process. And it makes you think, like, I was always wondering too, like, the Lord did things in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and then because man is supposed to work 6 days and rest on the seventh, and I always thought, man, that's such an unbalanced, unfair thing. I gotta put in 6 days of work and I only get 1 day of rest. That just seems unbalanced. Let me get, it should at least be 4-3. Let me get 3 days of rest. It's like 1 day of rest, man. But that's, spiritually speaking, I think that's what it is. Like, we have this work before us to keep our mind on heavenly things, to stay focused on spiritual things, and it takes that continual effort. It takes a 6-day effort, 16 hours, 6 days effort, and then you go to sleep. And then that seventh day is like our Sabbath, where you're gathered together with the church family, and there's, because of that communal atmosphere, it doesn't really take as much effort. Like, you're kind of collectively in the spirit. There's not a whole lot of effort needed there when you're all together. It's spiritual conversations happen. You're not really looking to go into fleshly things. There's, at least that's been my experience. But there's just this continual effort, and so far, using my brother for accountability and encouraging him to do the same has been working. And like I say, but my prayer is that it won't turn into a legalistic ritual where I lose the joy in it or the satisfaction in it and become something else. I see the danger there, but anyways, just thought I'd share that with you guys. So we were out camping this past weekend, Labor Day weekend. Had 5 great days out in the woods with my brothers, including a brother I hadn't seen in a long time. He lives out in Colorado, but he made a trip out this way. So I got to spend a couple days with him, and then another brother who doesn't often leave the cities. I'm with him pretty much every weekend, though. He's one of the brothers that attends my Bible study. He came down as well. And then me and my brother Brandon were there. We're the camping regulars, I guess you'd call it. We go out several times a year, but it was nice to have those other brothers with us as well. And before Caleb got there, when it was just Brandon, Cole, and myself, we had a conversation that was pretty interesting. I thought it would be good to share it. Hopefully I can recapture everything that was said. It got kind of heated, and I was on one side of the argument, and then Brandon and Cole on the other. And so hopefully I can do a fair job of trying to explain both sides of the position here and where we were coming from. But basically, the way it started was a hypothetical situation. If someone is outspoken against socialism, on social media or whatever, they're making posts saying socialism is bad, socialism is evil, whatever. If they do that, but then you find out that when the big C, I don't know if I can say that word, probably get banned on platforms just for talking about it, but when that big disease came out, and the government was offering stimulus checks, and they sent everybody a stimulus check, if that person took that money, which is a form of socialism, basically, should we dismiss what they're saying? Like, if they're going to speak out against socialism but then partake in it, doesn't that kind of disqualify what they're saying? And my brothers were saying, that kind of hypocrisy, it causes, we should dismiss what you say. If you're preaching against socialism but then you're partaking in it, well, then you're a hypocrite. And like their statement was, well, obviously you don't care enough about it to take it seriously, to do anything about it, so why should we listen to you? Now, my argument was that their hypocrisy, or perceived hypocrisy, or whatever you want to call it, at first I was arguing that I wouldn't necessarily even call that hypocrisy, and I'll explain why in a minute here, but should be a completely separate issue from the statement itself. Like, whether or not socialism is bad has nothing to do with the person telling me that socialism is bad. It has nothing to do with whether or not the person telling me is a hypocrite, or the person telling me partakes in socialism. If they make a statement, if anybody makes any statement Um, it's my, if I have any care about it at all, it's my duty to weigh that statement on its own, separate from the messenger. The messenger has no bearing on anything. It has no bearing on me as to whether or not their statement is factual. They say socialism is bad. That is a piece of information put out into the atmosphere here that I now have to deal with. I can either ignore it, dismiss it, whatever, but I would say if I'm a reasonable person, if I'm a thinking person that cares about truth, I'm going to take that statement and weigh it out. I'm going to say, is this true? Is this factual? It would be foolish of me. It would be illogical and emotionally based, emotionally charged for me to just dismiss the statement because the person is a perceived hypocrite. And so my brother was bringing up, like, how Jesus said in the scriptures, if you who practice adultery, then speak out against adultery and whatnot, pointing out hypocrisy. And that is true, but that's dealing, my point was, that's dealing with the individual. Hypocrisy is wrong. And you as an individual, if you are a hypocrite, that is something you and God need to deal, God needs to deal with you on that. You need to recognize that and work that out. But that character flaw in you has no bearing on the truth or the untruth of the statement you're making. If you're a participant in adultery, you're committing adultery, but you're out on the street preaching that adultery is sinful, and I find out that you are an adulterer, that damages your character, that besmirks your character, whatever. But it should have no bearing on the statement. I shouldn't just say, oh well, I don't have to listen to anything you have to say then. I should also, again, as a thinking person, I ought to go, okay, because my whole point was we're all hypocrites in a sense. Like, and who am I to look down my nose at anybody else? I perceive myself to be the worst of all sinners. And so if a person is saying, you shouldn't commit adultery, and they're committing adultery, yeah, that's messed up. You got to go examine your own house. You got to go clean your own yard, so to speak. Take care of your heart. But at the same time, that's individualistic. That's for you. That has no relevance on me. What you're doing in your personal life has no bearing on me. The thing that has an effect on me is whether or not the statement that you made is true. And so I need to look at that statement separate from the individual and weigh it out and go, is adultery wrong? And then we have a plumb line. We have the scriptures. That's we test all things by the light of scriptures. I go to the scriptures and I say, that guy was speaking the truth. Yeah, he's a hypocrite. He needs to take care of his own sin. He needs to also obey this law. But what he said is true. And so I need to base my reality, I need to base my worldview and my thinking on whether or not that statement was true, not whether or not the person is a hypocrite. And they were saying, like, basically what I was hearing from them is because they're a hypocrite, they're not even worth listening to. Like, you should just dismiss it. If somebody is speaking out against socialism and then they're taking a stimulus check, they're a hypocrite, and because they're a hypocrite, they're showing that they don't really care about the matter. They're not willing to take any action. They speak out against it, but they must not care enough to do anything about it. So therefore, why should we care about it? And I feel like that is such a foolish way to examine, like, truisms. It shouldn't matter at all, that source. If you say socialism is bad, and I go, is that statement true or not? And then I look into it and I go, oh wow, socialism really is bad. Do I just reject that truth now because you took a stimulus check? I don't think so. And the point I was trying to make to them is that taking a stimulus check is not really participating. Well, you are participating, but here was my point. The hypocrisy, the evil of socialism had already occurred. prior to the checks being issued, when the government decided to issue checks for everybody. That was the first cause, when the government decided to do it, when they put it into law, when they put forth the statement, or I don't know if it was actually a law or a presidential decree or whatever, that everybody's getting a stimulus check. That's where the socialism happened. It's already occurred. And so whether or not you accept the stimulus check has no bearing on it. It's already done. It already happened back in Congress when they said this is going to happen. That's where it went wrong. That's the socialism. The stimulus check is just an effect of it. And so then their argument was, yeah, but all these things tie together to add to a bigger problem. It's like the breadcrumbs leading a mouse to a trap. And my point was, no, we're already in the trap. The trap has already been set. The trap already happened when they said we're issuing checks for everybody. That's the trap. Now everybody is in the trap. You're in it already. So whether or not you take the breadcrumb has no relevance. It has no bearing on the trap itself. You're already in it. And so and you're starving, you're hurting, you might as well take the breadcrumb. I would have no problem with somebody who took that stimulus check coming to me and explaining to me the evils of socialism or the evils of communism, because it's so then this kind of like, we went down this whole rabbit trail of taking action and passivity and just trying to really get to the heart of like, if I personally were to speak out against socialism, why am I doing it? Because I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not about taking up arms. I don't believe. So this is what I was saying to them. I said, the beast system is already done. It's already written. It is going to happen. The Lord has written it. It's the Lord knows the beginning from the end. He works all things according to the counsel of his will. It's planned, it's done. It's just like we are already seated in the heavenlies, just like we are already justified in his courts, just like we are already glorified. Those things are written, they're done. It's done because God exists outside of time. What is done is done. And he has written that the beast system will happen. That's done. He's written that a mark of the beast will come. That's done. It's done. It will happen. There is no stopping it. There's no amount of reform. There's no amount of revolution. There's nothing that can stop it from happening. The only question is, we don't know where on the timeline we exist. We don't know if we're going to see these things come to pass, or if the Lord is delaying them, and perhaps we're in a time of a pause, or not a pause, but a protected time, like where we're not going to see the fruits of that. And so then why do we speak out against it if it can't be stopped? If we're going to have an authoritarian system, if we're going to have world government, then why speak out against it? And I told my brother, like, that's a really good question. That's something I wrestle with internally all the time. Like, why bother telling people about this? Why try to wake people up? And I think there's a few things. One, we're called on to expose the unfruitful works of darkness. We're called to bring them to the light. We're called to show this is evil. We're called to point it out to people. So that's first and foremost. And then secondarily, I would say, because we don't know where we are on that timeline, perhaps we are in a time where God will delay things, where God will bring reformation, where God will bring a revival and stir people up to stop this, or to delay this. Like I said, there is no stopping it, but we don't know what time we're in. And so my hope is that in speaking truths like this, like saying socialism is bad or speaking about the New World Order or whatever, even though I'm not gonna take up arms and fight against it, because that's not, the Christians are called to a mission of reconciliation. We're not supposed to be violent. We're not like that. That's not what we're supposed to do. But I am gonna expose it, and then my hope is that we may be in a time where God may rise people up, where somebody might hear about these things and investigate them. They might be somebody of influence or power or knowledge or ideas that might have an idea of how to bring about reform and a revival and restore our Constitution and give us back what our forefathers had. I don't know, because I don't know what time we're in. I don't know. But because I think the idea was, the hypocrisy is, if you're gonna speak out about it and not do anything about it, then why should anybody else care about it? And I would argue that speaking out against it is doing something about it, and ultimately it can't be stopped. But like I say, we don't know the time we're in, so perhaps it can be delayed. And in the meantime, speaking about spiritual matters like the New World Order or the beast system, or how we're moving into that, can often open the door to evangelism, can often open the door to the gospel. And as we move towards this beast system, individuals will be saved out of it and translated into our kingdom. And so that's my hope. And so I guess ultimately it came down to they were looking at the internal aspect of hypocrisy, saying, it's wrong for this person to be a hypocrite. How can they be expected to be taken seriously if they're speaking out against it but doing it? And that's true. But my point was, that has nothing to do with me. If somebody is speaking a truth to me, their personal sanctification, their personal sin and error and hypocrisy is their business. That's between them and God. My business is what they're saying, what the information they're presenting. Is it true or not? And used an idea like, if somebody is preaching to me about how caffeine is bad for me, because I drink a pot of coffee every day and have an energy drink every now and then, and they're saying, all that caffeine is bad for you, and then I look over and they're drinking a cup of coffee, do I just dismiss what they say? That would be illogical. That would be unreasonable. That would be emotional. That would be me saying that whether or not your statement is true, I don't care. I'm just looking for a reason to dismiss what you have to say. And because I see that you're a hypocrite, I'm going to dismiss what you have to say. That's not intelligent. That's not wise. Instead, I ought to go, okay, regardless of this person's hypocrisy, is caffeine bad for me? Is their statement true? And let me go examine this, and let me, and let me test it by the things I know and the things I've read, and let me examine that statement. Their personal hypocrisy is none of my concern. It has no bearing or relevance on the statement. So I just, like I say, I was vehemently arguing for this, because it was like, a person, the messenger, should have nothing to do with whether or not I accept a statement. If you are an adulterer and a liar and a thief and a murderer and just every sort of sin you can imagine, but I hear you say, hey, adultery and murder and theft is wrong, okay, well, obviously, in your own personal life, you need to practice what you preach. If your statement is true, then you're in a whole lot of trouble because you do these things. But that, again, that's a personal, individualistic thing. That's between you and the truth you've spoken. What is for me is what you said true? If it is, the messenger has no bearing at all. And I feel like it would be just foolish and ridiculous to just dismiss something because you see somebody's a hypocrite. We are all hypocrites, you know. If only perfect people get to speak, well then, we're in a whole lot of trouble. That is an illogical way to think. I want to look at the substance of what you're saying, not the substance of your character. If you're a known liar, then of course that fact is going to play into my skepticism of what's being said. That, as I weigh out and test what's being said, that's certainly going to have an initial guiding factor in it. But it's not the ultimate say. What you're saying true? Does it line up with the scriptures? Does it line up with a biblical worldview? And if it's true, well, then I need to take it as truth. If I find that caffeine is bad for me, the fact that you drink caffeine has no bearing at all. It's the only bearing is on you as an individual. What you said was true, so you ought to apply that to your life as well. But if what you said is true, then I need to be applying that to my life as well. And it would just be insane, or not insane, but it would be unwise and just foolish for me to dismiss what you're saying because of your hypocrisy. I could miss out on a whole lot of information that way. And yeah, I guess it was an interesting conversation. And like I say, ultimately, it came down to individualistic factors versus external factors. The hypocrisy, one of my brother Brandon was saying, like, he's looking more at the heart of the individual. This is more about, if you're a hypocrite, you need to do something about that. You need to change that. And that's true, but that's not the point that I'm looking at. The point is, if somebody says socialism's bad, it doesn't matter whether or not they participate in socialism. For me, externally, for me, that is irrelevant. What matters is socialism bad or not? I need to study that out and figure that out. That's what's for me. What's for that person is, if what they're saying is true, then apply it to yourself as well. But I'm not going to just dismiss it because it's coming from a hypocritical source. Like I said, we're all hypocrites in some way or shape or form. But anyways, just wanted to share that with you. All right, so that's what I got for you guys this week. As always, I truly appreciate you listening. I love you, and Lord willing, we'll talk to you next time.